Yes, thank you. Happy May Day. I thought the speakers before me left me kind of a tough job. They kind of said kind of a lot of things I was wanting to say. And I really agree with the one main thing that sort of kept coming out from everybody, which is labor has to fight for and represent the entire working class, you know, as a whole. And maybe we could broaden the concept of what labor is. It's all working people. Then you kind of, in a sense, you have 100% density, you know what I mean? So, what I'd like to start from is just to say, it is not possible to fix capitalism, nor for that matter is it desirable. And I think it's good to keep this in mind when you're thinking about how to actually stop the war on workers. So what windows does it open when we start from this point? You know, first we see what the stakes are. The attacks coming down on us are an attempt by the bosses to make workers pay for the economic crisis and to flat out bust all the unions at the same time. Wipe out the union movement. And we realize that our only hope is to use our power as a class. That power that comes from the class that turns all the wheels, or that does not turn the wheels if we decide so. And lastly, it becomes clear that it's really important that we bridge all our divides and bring the working class together to fight, relying on each other and not on Democratic Party politicians. Yeah. So, there is a widespread sense that the stakes are very high and the economic problems quite deep. The concentration of wealth is really obscene now. A recent report from the American Human Development Index said, partially due to income inequality and decline of unionization in America, there is now a 30-year gap in life expectancy between the Deep South and New England. Wow. What the hell, right? This proves that Karl Marx was right when he described this inevitable and ever-worsening consequence of the profit system. Of course, the corporate elite, you know, they're going to blame what? Immigrants, public workers, anybody who stands up and demands decent services and jobs for all. And their solution, as so many have been pointing out, and Nikki pointed out in gruesome detail how the services are being cut. And they want to, as you said, break the public sector unions because they are much more organized, as you pointed out, and they are what stands between the corporations and their dream of low-wage, super high-profit capitalism. And this, you know, they're doing these cuts in almost every state where they're filling budget holes not by stopping the war and bringing the billions home, not by taxing the record corporate profits, $1.68 trillion in the last 3 months of last year alone, or taxing the unprecedented $2 trillion in corporate assets. Obviously, the money is there. There are now a dozen states that are passing laws stripping away collective bargaining rights, many of them more aggressive than Wisconsin's. For example, in Massachusetts, Democratic majorities in the legislature are about to pass right-to-work legislation. So Marx had plenty of good ideas also about how workers can chart an independent course from the bosses and thereby win a better future. But it doesn't look like the AFL-CIO is thinking of going in this direction. Instead of using the real power of the working class, they're too quick to huddle with their supposed friends in the Democratic Party and figure out some way to patch up the profit system and make sure workers keep their political response within the electoral arena. And you'll notice they talk a lot about evil Republicans, but not so much about double-dealing Democrats. Fortunately, a more reality-based approach can be found in this movie, A Bug's Life. It's a kid's movie, obviously. You've probably seen it. The ants are the workers, and the grasshoppers are the overseers, and the ants start organizing against their exploitation, you know, and the main grasshopper, he brings the other grasshoppers together and he says, you know, we got to realize there's a lot more of them than there is of us. He says, and if we don't stop this right away, it'll be the end of our way of life as we know it. Okay, well, it didn't faze the ants, and they persevered, kept on organizing, and they prevailed. And they use their collective power. So I'm thinking the ants, they must have read the Communist Manifesto. We said, the proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Plenty of grown-up workers have a firm grasp on reality, too. Many Wisconsin unionists and their supporters chanted general strike the night that Walker's anti-union bill passed the Senate there. And in fact, there is a long history in this country of using general strikes to advance workers' rights or to beat back the boss's attacks. Maybe, and in Wisconsin, even though they did establish a committee for the Labor Council there to study that, and they came up with good materials to educate people. Unfortunately, they took everybody into the recall campaigns, which really diffused that energy. But we could educate about this, and there's going to be an article about this in the upcoming issue of the Freedom Socialist, so you can subscribe, you'll get it. So, how can we build for actions that use our real power? Many of folks, including our panelists, like Nikki, were very involved in organizing for the April Days of Action in Olympia. So you all know the critical need to bring all working people together to fight. I'll just put out one idea. I think one way to keep this going is by forming working people's assemblies. This is just a concept that has been tried in other places. In Massachusetts, in Lynn, Massachusetts, the latest Labor Notes magazine describes a successful effort like this. And we have so many people working on a wide range of issues, you know, talking about stopping budget cuts, advocating for the homeless, keeping people in their houses. Assembly would bring all these folks together to coordinate their efforts on an ongoing basis. Instead of everybody breaking up after the big rally, they would continue organizing together, and they would keep talking about what their vision is, because, you know, we need to, in a city like Seattle, would have to develop a transformative vision that of how our city can be run to meet people's needs rather than boost corporate profits. And I thought, you know, some demands are great ones, like Nikki just laid out, something like 32-hour work week, you know, like maybe a ban on foreclosures or stopping of foreclosures physically. You know, all these kind of actions, these are things that could be discussed. But this gives this gives folks a prize to keep their eyes on, and it makes the organizing more sustainable. And you could build this into a statewide network of assemblies. And that network would have a much different vision than the one that is going on in Olympia right now in the legislature in a special session. Now I'm going to do a pop quiz here. What do all the following Olympia dastardly deeds have in common? The all cuts budget, the attacks on ferry workers' bargaining rights, going after teachers' seniority rights, and now in a special session after everybody's gone home, they come out and all they want to privatize everything in sight, including child welfare services. Any ideas what they all have in common? Bingo. All sponsored by the Democrats. So, and then there's another 30% increase in tuition that I read about in the paper this morning. I mean, I could go on, right? You could all go on. But sisters and brothers, we can't go on like this. So we have to have an alternative, whether it's running independent labor candidates or, I think, possibly building a labor party. We have to talk about this more and figure out how to build a political alternative that represents working people. The April Days of Action, I think, were a very good labor community coalition effort with the unions involved, and it was very good to see. I think the labor rally that on that Friday was quite impressive and was organized by the State Labor Council. But then everything died down during a special session, and there wasn't much labor turnout for the May Day March in Seattle. But what I was most disappointed with was I got the other day my political action alert from the Labor Council. And it was about the attacks on workers' compensation, which are terrible. But the title of it was, "Tell the legislature, stop targeting injured workers, pass the budget and go home." But poor folks can't live with that terrible budget, and the State Labor Council should not say it's okay to pass it just to get their issues addressed. This is an example of the narrow, take care of yourself first outlook that has dominated the labor movement for far too long. Lesson number one for labor: Coalition means never throwing your partners under the bus. By the way, but really, by the way, rank and file unionists do understand that concept. So you may remember May Day in 2008 here, where the longshore workers shut down the West Coast ports in protest of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. A solidarity statement was sent to them from the General Union of Port Workers in Iraq, and it said in part, "A better world will only be created by workers, and what you are doing is an example of proof of what we say." And recently, protesters in Wisconsin and in Egypt are each carrying signs that support each other's struggle. Marx would be proud. Yes. And the Freedom Socialist Party is proud to continue the legacy of Marxism. We are a fighting organization that thinking working class people and fighters can join. As the song says, "In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold. Let's use it." Happy birthday, happy May Day.